Hola, yo soy Carol Perelman y me da muchísimo gusto estar hoy con ustedes con Enlace Judío para platicar con el vicepresidente del Instituto Weizmann de Ciencias en su primera visita a México, ya una vez siendo vicepresidente del Instituto Weizmann de Ciencias, aunque lleva siendo investigador por muchos años de nuestro querido Mahon Weizmann en Rehovot. Entonces, bueno, Roee, welcome to Mexico.
Thank you very much.
We're very happy to host you, to have you.
I'm very happy to be here.
And we'd like to know, in Enlace Judío, since 1934, when the Weizmann Institute was founded by Chaim Weizmann, the first president of Israel, Weizmann Institute has always been on the forefront of science. So what are now, if you can pinpoint, the most urgent matters in science and what researchers at the Weizmann Institute are pursuing?
I think that's a great question. I'll start by saying that at the Weizmann Institute we never direct our scientists in a given direction. So it's our scientists who decide what are the most urgent matters to look into, what are the hottest scientific fronts, what is the most interesting direction to follow. And for us, we're almost religious about it in making sure that our scientists are free. Nevertheless, I can look at what our scientists are choosing. And I can tell you that, for example, one huge front that many of our scientists are working towards today is that of understanding the brain. Understanding the brain is something that, it's probably the last frontier in life sciences with huge implications on disease, neurodegenerative disease, mental health. Another very big initiative that we see many of our scientists embarking on is that of environmental sustainability. In order for us to understand how can we produce food in sustainable way, how can we guarantee food security for humanity for generations to come, how can we produce energy in a green, sustainable way, how can we produce materials that are green and degradable and would not aggregate in the environment. This is a very important flagship project that we have currently at the Weizmann Institute. I guess the third direction I can point to is that of astrophysics and particle physics, understanding the universe, the cosmos at large, from the biggest things to the smallest things. Another huge front is a front that I personally participate in, is that of quantum technologies and quantum computing. A new technological paradigm which is likely to really disrupt the world of technology as we know today, at least in some aspects.
Very eager to see all of what comes out from that, but I want you to tell me a little bit more about the new frameworks in research for cancer. Cancer is one of the biggest concerns nowadays in health. So, and I know at the Weizmann Institute, the approach has been very interesting and many good advancements, probably future therapies will emerge from there. So
absolutely. Cancer has been and still is one of the major disease that humans deal with. I think that cancer research has made tremendous progress in the last several decades. And this is particularly due to the understanding of the way genetic mechanisms happen and occur. And cancer, for the most part, is the breaking down of our genetic replication mechanism, and that mechanism getting completely out of control. And I think that if you look at previous decades where our ability to treat cancer relied on methods that were not cancer specific, like radiation therapy or chemotherapy, these techniques attack healthy cells as much as cancer cells, tumor cells. Today there are treatments that can target tumors directly. Now, our ability to do that really hinges on decades of scientific exploration. The people who understood how genetic mechanisms happen, they wanted to understand genetics. It wasn't really cancer that they immediately had in mind. And we follow that line of belief. We try to understand the basic mechanisms behind genetic replication, the basic mechanisms behind cancer, in order to hopefully find treatment for cancer. One interesting direction that we have been following in the last few years is that of immunotherapy, ways to harness the immune system in order to attack cancer tumors. In fact, cancer T-cell therapy was developed at the Weizmann Institute by the group of Professor Zelig Eschar. Very two recent developments in cancer research. In the group of Dr. Efrat Shema, we found a possible way of detecting cancer with a simple blood test. This would be a revolution in early cancer detection if that actually goes through clinical trials and matures. In the group of Professor Ravid Straussman, who is an MD, PhD, and a researcher at the Weizmann Institute, in his group they found that tumors, very similar to people, have a microbiome environment. There's actually a colony of bacteria that live off tumors with symbiotic relationship between the bacteria and the tumor. And if we can find a way to attack these bacteria, and in fact we can attack bacteria very efficiently, perhaps that's another avenue with which we can attack tumors. So many things are happening, and this is a very fast-moving field.
Now, I think a very interesting field also is talk about sustainability. And Ron Milo was in the headlines last year for his research, and he's so creative and research. So can you talk a little bit about what he found now that we have 8 billion people living on Earth? I think we should listen to Ron Milo.
Absolutely. Ron is amazing. And Ron is one of these scientists who, besides his proficiency and professionalism in working in biology and running labs and experiments, is also an expert in data analysis. So he can analyze data and come up with insightful ideas. Ron, by the way, is the person who analyzed or was responsible for part of the analysis of the COVID data during the epidemic in Israel. So one question that Ron recently answered was the following. We know that on Earth we have biomass. Biomass is the total mass of all people, all animals, all bacteria, all algae in the ocean, all forests, everything which is life. On the other hand, on Earth, we have man-made mass. We call that anthropomass. Anthropomass is the mass of all buildings, cars, house appliances, roads, everything that we actually build. Now, the total mass on Earth is not going to change. So very often, anthropomass comes at the expense of biomass. What Ron did was a very deep and wide survey that evaluated the amount of biomass and the amount of anthropomass for the past 200 years or so, and was able to show that 2020 was actually a crossover year in which the amount of anthropomass, the amount of man-made mass, has actually superseded past the amount of biomass on Earth. And that is because not just anthropomass climbing steadily, biomass on Earth is decreasing steadily. And this is certainly something we have to keep our minds of, and a trend we need to reverse if we would like life here to be sustainable. If biomass would continue going down eventually, we're biomass, we would not survive.
And talking about COVID, the world was stopped by COVID, but the Weizmann Institute did not stop. On the contrary, we heard a lot of news and a lot of advancements. Specifically, I would love for you to explain a little bit more about the work of near London and how he used open science to receive and to gather the world, the chemical world, and work in computers, chemical computers, to develop a new drug against COVID, which we urgently need. So how is this coming along?
So actually, Nir's story is a very interesting story. But maybe before I tell that story, I should say that when COVID broke, at the Weizmann Institute, we had maybe 1 or 2 labs that worked on infectious disease. We didn't have many labs that worked in that area. And we very quickly realized, maybe within a month or so, that dozens of groups, more than 60 research projects, were initiated in order to combat COVID. This was due to the fact that our scientists understood that this is a global challenge and a challenge that requires, science to act very, very quickly. And that's why they turned their talent and their energy and their expertise into trying to find a cure for COVID. Near London is one of those scientists. Near London is a medical chemist, so he designs small molecules that can be used for drugs. Already in January 2020, he received the structure of a part of the virus from colleagues in China and designed very small molecules that could attach to that part of the virus and slow down its action. Now, small molecules are not enough if you'd like to fully stop the action of the virus. You need larger molecules. And usually, the development of larger molecules, aka drugs, based on small molecules is a process that takes years and years. It's a lot of trial and error, serious computations followed by synthesis, trial, error, back to the design, back to the synthesis. This could take a decade easily. But here we did not have a decade. And therefore, in a project that was termed the Moonshot Project, the COVID Moonshot Project, Near London's lab at the Weizmann Institute teamed up with groups in Oxford University and in Sloan Kettering in the US. And they did the following thing. They published all these small molecules to the public and came up with a public call for any chemist in the world to try and use computational resources that they put at the hands of the public in order to come up with suggestions for larger molecules. This sped up the development process significantly. So this was really open science type project. Within a couple of months, Nir and his colleagues received a few hundred, if not 1,000, suggestions for drugs. They could go through them, prioritize them, come up with a short list. With funding that we supplied, this collaboration was able to synthesize these molecules and then try them out in laboratories in all these institutions. And with this rapid turnaround process, they were able to produce a drug which is now in clinical trials. So I think this is really an inspiring story in the sense that you can see the scientific community on the one hand, being recruited and jumps into action. We need to act now, and they do it. And then instead of doing science, in close collaborations, opening up to the public and use, the public as a resource. I find that a wonderful story.
And as a science communicator and as one of the developers and currently the director of the Jardín Weizmann de Ciencias, which is the Weizmann Science Garden Museum we have here at the Jewish Center at the Centro Deportivo Israelita, I have to ask you, what can we see in the near future from the Clore Garden of Science in Rehovot?
I'm really glad you asked that question because that question invites me to invite you to visit the Weizmann Institute. I think the Clore Garden of Science, which would be reopened very soon and is really remade. It's not just refurbished. It's really remake from the start. Is one of the science education experiences you can give yourself and your families and your friends. But the Weizmann Institute also offers a unique visiting experience with a visitor center and historical sites such as the villa of Chaim Weizmann, the first presidential residence of the State of Israel, and a vibrant scientific community. Back to the Clore Garden of Science. The Clore Garden of Science is a unique concept. It's a unique concept. There are science museums in the world. Many of them are breathtaking, very creative, amazing in their ability to communicate science. The Clore Garden of Science is unique in the sense that it's an outdoors garden of science. For the past 2 years, it's been rebuilt through the generous support of the Clore Foundation. This fall, or the coming fall, it's gonna reopen, and it's gonna offer children and their parents and adults who are curious about science a unique experience of science in the outdoors, from exhibitions that portray how the human body works, all the way to open code facilities that can program fountains, all the way to a microbiome and a sustainability area that teaches kids how sustainable environments should look like, and many, many more. So this is really a great experience, not just for having fun, but also for understanding science, which is a very important task today.
And it is very encouraging that a research center like the Weizmann Institute promotes science for children and using their capacity also to educate and communicate the culture, no, the scientific culture. So I will go, and I hope many of you would go to Israel to campus. I will. Okay, so let's talk about your passion, about quantum computing. So what I want to ask you is probably one of the most important races in last century was the space race. Many great breakthroughs were made in many aspects of life, technology, politics, and economics, everything after the race space. Now I feel like we're in the middle of the quantum computing race. And I'm very happy to know that the first computer built in Israel was built by you and your team. So tell us a little bit about why it's important for Israel, for you, for the Weizmann Institute, to have a quantum computer, and what can we expect of that breakthrough?
Gladly, and maybe before I do that, I can give a little bit of a background, because when I entered the field of quantum physics, and even quantum computing, I didn't do that because I thought that this is a technology that would change the world. It's not that I thought it wouldn't, but that wasn't the motivation. The motivation was that I thought that quantum physics is the most mind-blowing, aesthetic, curious theory I've ever had to deal with. And I was there due to sheer curiosity, not because I thought that technology, and as is very often the case when people are following their curiosity, and I'm not just talking about myself, I'm talking about scientific community in general, and people follow their curiosity, that's when technologies, disruptive technologies really come to fruition. I also want to say that quantum computing is just one example of a more general term, which is quantum technologies. Many technologies would benefit from pushing the performance of that particular technology to the limit that quantum mechanics allows for. So in that sense, if you look at sensors, and we have sensors everywhere, here's a sensor right in front of me. If you want to push sensors to the limit of their performance, the limit of their performance is dictated by quantum physics, by the laws of physics. If you look at information transfer, we don't just compute, we transfer information all the time. If we push the limits of information transfer to those that are governed by the laws of quantum mechanics, we're going to improve on information transfer. Really, any technology we can think of, if we push it to the limits that quantum mechanics allows for, we'll be able to improve on that performance. In the particular case of computing, that is a very serious revolution, because we discovered, and these are ideas that initiated in the 1980s, initially by a very famous American Jewish physicist by the name of Richard Feynman, a Nobel laureate, a very colorful character. I don't know if you read his autobiography. It's very amusing. He was at Caltech, and he conjectured that by using computers that operate at the limit that quantum mechanics allows for, we're not just going to improve the performance of computers by a little bit. We will actually be able to solve problems that currently, with computers that are not there, we are not able to solve at all. So quantum computers are a technology that offers the promise of solving problems that today are fully unsolvable. And that is a serious revolution. That is a serious revolution that is likely to have impact anywhere from drug design and material design through logistics and optimization of financial portfolios, all the way to the world of cryptography and breaking codes. So I think that having this technology at hand is very important. I think that in particular for Israel, it's important to have that technology because, like in any strategic technology, an asset, I think it's important for countries, and especially for a country like Israel, to have that ability in-house and to be able to offer that technology to the Israeli ecosystem.
And I think I have to ask you, because probably most of you would love to know, the first electronic computers were in the 1950s. And then we have the laptop many, many years afterwards, no? When we really were able to have that application, that technology. Besides of the scientific knowledge that arose after those computers, we then had the laptops many years afterwards. What about quantum computers? Will we ever have personal quantum computers? I think there are many challenges to be overcome, like the ultra cold atoms and many challenges. But do you foresee a future where we would have personal computers?
So I think ever is a very long time. So I think trying to hypothesize about ever is a serious challenge. I think that the best we can do is look back at history and try to project from our experience. You mentioned the first electronic computers. The first electronic computer in Israel was built at the Weizmann Institute of Science. It was called the Weizsack, and if you accept my invitation and you visit the Weizmann Institute of Science, you can still see it on display at our computer science faculty. It had 40 bits at its input. Today, your washing machine probably has millions or billions of bits, and it was about the size of half a room. So I'm sure that if you would ask the people back there in the 1940s and 50s that worked on that computer, whether that computer is ever going to fit in your pocket, they would say, no way in hell. But, as we very well know, it did. So I think that, trying to conjecture or project a few decades ahead, it'll be foolish of me to say that I can't see a future with quantum computers being miniaturized and, I don't know if fit into a pocket, but certainly being a commodity. I should say that today, if you look at the next decade at least, quantum computers are most likely to remain unique facilities similar to high-performance computers, clusters of processors that are held in specific centers, and then people would connect to these centers through cloud services and use these computers online from afar. So these computers are not going to be, at least not tremendously compactified and become a household appliance or technology. But decades away, who knows?
And so let's talk a little bit about greater things, and let's talk about space. And I think you have very interesting projects in the pipeline for space exploration and for understanding our place in the universe. So
yes, absolutely. We have a very big program in astrophysics and particle physics. We believe that exploring the universe from its farthest reaches and sizes, and the biggest things in the universe all the way to the smallest, is our way of understanding the basic laws of nature better. We actually have two amazing astrophysical projects. One of them is the deployment of a space telescope. I think that if you would ask people 10, 20 or even 10 years ago whether a scientific institution of the size of Weizmann Institute has the capacity and the expertise to lead a space telescope mission, the answer would be no way. It's too expensive, too complex. But I think if you look at the way that the space industry has gone since then, payload have become smaller. Israel has become a powerhouse of space technology, so to a large extent we can leverage on the expertise of space technology that we find at the industries around the Weizmann Institute of Science. Launching to space became cheaper and easier. So we indeed embarked on this project. It's a space telescope that is extremely cheap. It only costs about $100 million, which is probably a factor of 10 to 100 below what typical space telescope projects cost. Idea to deployment, it only took a few years, which is also a very fast time scale. This telescope is designed to look at transient events. It's designed to look at events that happen in the universe but then disappear very quickly. In order to be able to do that, you need to survey the sky with a very wide field of view, and you need to be able to communicate to Earth very quickly. Two different events that we'll be looking for with this telescope. One of them is the explosion of stars, so stars reaching their death moment, supernovas. And you know that we're all made out of heavy elements. We're made out of carbon, we're made out of iron, we're made out of calcium. All these elements are produced in these supernova, and we don't understand supernova very accurately. The other thing that this telescope would detect would be extrasolar planets. We will detect the small eclipse that they produce when they cross their host star in line with our observation angle. In both cases, Ultrasat would alert the biggest telescopes on Earth to rotate and take a very quick and thorough look of these quick events. And one of these telescopes, in fact, a telescope that is likely to be one of the two largest telescopes on Earth, is the Giant Magellan Telescope in Chile, which is another connection to Latin America, to which we joined as a founder institution recently. And that means that the technology on board that Giant Magellan Telescope would be partly developed and built at the Weizmann Institute and adjacent Israeli industries. So we're very excited about this, and I just want to end this by saying that one of the future long-term goals of studying these extrasolar planets is being able to analyze light that would go through their atmosphere in search for detection of signatures of oxygen or water or methane. All these are indicators of the presence of life on that planet. So a long-term goal of that research project is a search for extrasolar life, which for me is mind-blowing.
So, being a woman and a scientist, I have to ask you about the great projects that the Weizmann Institute has to promote women scientists in their careers, which have their unique challenges.
That's very true. If we look at the percentage of women faculty at the Weizmann Institute of Science, I think today, if I'm not mistaken, the percentage is at 25%, which is well below what we need it to be. I'm talking about faculty. If we look at the percentage of women as graduate students, at least in the life sciences, it's 50%. So there's a very serious decline of women pursuing their academic career between the stage of PhD and the stage of taking on a faculty position. So the postdoc period is really a cliff. And the reasons for that are obvious. This is usually the age where women, especially in the Israeli and the Jewish culture, start their family, they have kids, and the pressure and burden increases significantly. And we understand that this is a problem not just for the women who give up their scientific career, but for science. We're giving up on 50% of the talent on Earth. And, the next woman Einstein or the next, woman Darwin could be, or Ada Yonat, could be, giving up on their academic career. And we see it our responsibility to make sure that we offer the tools for that to happen less. One of the, I think, nicest programs that we run is a program that offers financial support to women scientists who graduated from their graduate studies and go for a postdoc outside of Israel. And these women don't have to come from the Weizmann Institute. They, in fact, can come from any scientific institution in Israel. In Israel, a postdoc period is expected to be performed outside of Israel, mostly in the US or in Europe or Canada. And when we identify these talented women, we pay an extra salary over on top of their postdoc salary to make sure that at least the financial constraints of doing your postdoc abroad and having to move your family away would not be, the game changer that would convince them to give up on their scientific career. This program has run now for almost 10 years with, a wonderful spectrum of scientist women who later on returned and took on faculty positions at the Weizmann Institute. Today, some of them are already, beyond the young scientist, label. They're already taking on leadership roles. So we believe that this is a wonderful initiative and well worth the investment. And we're constantly looking for other methods of making sure that women would not find the challenges that they have throughout their career as a reason to depart from scientific activity.
I hope to see that in more institutions. We need more scientists, more women scientists. So thank you for that. And well, I want to finish by asking you if there is anything else that you would like to share with us with Enlace Judío. We understood after the pandemic, and most of us, we knew before the pandemic even, the importance of science in our everyday life. Science is part of our culture. Science is made by human beings. So I think it's very important to communicate it. And having you in Mexico, it's a very important and a very unique opportunity to talk about the advancements and what is going on in research.
I think that, as you mentioned, science is probably the most efficient tool in the last, several centuries. The main tool with which mankind was able to increase our lifespan, to improve our health, to fight hunger, to improve on communication, to improve on mobility. Science is really the basis of all technology we see today. Science also teaches people to tackle problems in a rational way. So I think science literacy is incredibly important. I think that governments and organizations should invest as much as possible to make sure that the public, and starting from a very young age, are educated about science. This would lead, literate public is a public that can take informed decisions and logical decisions. And this is a public in which the discourse can be based on logical reasoning and not only emotions. So I think scientific literacy is very important. It's a very important task. I think that for countries like Israel and for Mexico, it's very important to foster and encourage a very strong scientific community, because that scientific community would be the basis for the knowledge on which that society would thrive. And the way to do that is to identify the talented people, the creative people who could do science, and then set them free to follow their dreams and perform scientific research. Let them follow their curiosity, let them follow their ideas, and the revenues, the added value would follow. That's guaranteed.
Well, and you don't have to be a scientist to think like a scientist. So it's very important what you say, to teach science and improve science literacy, because we need more scientific thinking in this world. I want to end by thanking you. This has been very inspiring. Israel, in the last years especially, has been labeled as the innovation country. Is giving so much technology, so much science knowledge to the world, that talking to you has been very inspiring. And I hope many of you would go to the Weizmann Institute, to Mahon Weizmann, and visit you very soon on campus.
Thank you very much, Carol. It's been a pleasure talking to you. It's been a pleasure being here in Mexico, and thank you all for watching.
Pues muchas gracias. Yo soy Carol Perelman para Enlace Judío y estuve con el profesor Roee Ozeri, vicepresidente del Instituto Weizmann de Ciencias. Muchas gracias.